Hello, everybody, and welcome to a brand new, fun, and exciting episode of Back to Basics. Despite all efforts to the contrary, I am still Pastor Don, and I am joined by our wonderful, special, dedicated expert on the subject of wrestling, Courtney.
Yes. Yes. Hello.
So we are prepared for today. Courtney. This is a passage you've been looking forward to for a little while, right?
You're hyping it up too much, dude. I've read through it. This is not a 5-star banger.
It's not a great banger, but it's also like it's a thing that happens that like we gotta talk about. Like this is not a normal thing that happens.
Yeah, this is it's such a weird fucking story. I shouldn't cuss. We're probably still in the first minute. Except for we don't monetize anyway, do we?
Yeah, so it doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. Fuck it.
Exactly. So yeah, you want to just dive right in then?
All right. Let me see if I can pull this off here.
Yeah, so we're going to be in Genesis chapter 32, and we're going to be starting from verse number 22 on to 32. It's only 10 verses, but I think it's going to be a fun 10 verses. Take it away.
All right. The same night, he got up and took his 2 wives, his 2 maids, and his 11 children, and crossed the ford of the Jabbok. He took them and sent them across the stream, and likewise everything that he had. Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until daybreak. When the man saw that he did not prevail against Jacob, he struck him on the hip socket, and Jacob's hip was put out of joint as he wrestled with him. Then he said, "Let me go, for the day is breaking." But Jacob said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." So he said to him, "What is your name?" And he said, "Jacob." Then the man said, "You shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with humans, and have prevailed." Then Jacob asked him, "Please tell me your name." But he said, "Why is it that you ask my name?" And there he blessed him. So Jacob called the place Peniel, saying, "For I have seen God face to face, yet my life is preserved." The sun rose upon him as he passed Peniel, limping because of his hip. Therefore, to this day, the Israelites do not eat the thigh muscle that is on the hip socket, because he struck Jacob on the hip socket at the thigh muscle.
All right. So lots of stuff here. I'm going to ask a bit of a loaded question here. What is one word that going into this passage you might have expected to see here that you did not?
Oh, angel.
Yeah. It is never explicitly said who or what in the non-literal hell Jacob actually wrestled with here. You know, we often talk about it like, you know, he went toe to toe with a seraphim or something, but you know, 6 wings and a million eyes notwithstanding. It's interesting if you look at Alter's notes, and I love this, that Alter goes here to a lot of different places and even highlights where is it? When we get the whole "let me go, dawn is breaking" thing here, that this is connected to common folk traditions about various demons and goblins and shit like that. Like
Macho men
could be anybody. But it's not a rational or real or normal somebody. It's definitely somebody special. But as to who,
cream of the crop, as it were.
What?
Said the cream of the crop, as it were.
Well, it's interesting. And this is something that I love to, honestly, I mean, I love to fuck with evangelicals anyway, but this is a fun one to fuck with them on. If you take the evangelical perspective that there is a good and a bad side, a devil and a God side to things, that is never once said which side this dude's on. Like,
well, it sounds like Jacob thinks he saw God.
Yeah, honestly, I mean, that's Jacob's perspective. I mean, if somebody
he thinks he wrestled
like,
God.
Yeah, if somebody fought you like that all night and then just tapped you on the hip and caused you to tap out, and then
He
changed
didn't
your
tap
name
out. He
for
kept
you.
going. He wrestled injured. He's a real sport. No, but I was not expecting to go into this and end up being like, oh, Jacob has something in common with Vince McMahon. They both claim to have wrestled God.
Really? I'm not a wrestling guy, but is that really a thing?
I can link it in the Discord, but yes,
Lord.
it's a thing. He was feuding with born again Christian Shawn Michaels and decided that he was going to start like feuding with God to piss off Shawn Michaels.
I'm not sure if that's a
Wrestling,
good thing or a bad thing or somewhere in between. It just seems weird.
it was a Vince thing, and it was terrible. Ugh, it was horrible. Memorable though. Anyway, this is not a wrestling podcast. Come on.
Yeah, that's fine because you are the wrestling stan and I am the uninitiated, so be that as it may. So yeah, so the name thing, what do you take on that?
Well, I got a little bit confused because he says he called the place Peniel and then he passed Peniel.
Those are different things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, is that something that was clarified earlier or
not really. Yeah, not really. Like, it's one of those things where
it just tripped me up because they're so close. They're
English readers would be like, wow,
off.
that's super similar, but Hebrew readers would be like, yeah, those are different things.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's an anglicization issue right there. I wouldn't worry too much about that. They just happen to look similar in English.
Okay.
What about the name change thing? Like he gets a brand new name out the deal. What do you think about that?
The fact that he got that he won the name Israel in a wrestling match is a little wild.
Yeah. Well, he's not the first biblical character to get a name change.
No.
But it is the more dramatic of the two.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose when you're getting direct supernatural involvement, it's hard not to say it's rather dramatic. But I mean, this is very over the top. Like, it's literally a wrestling match.
Yeah. And it's a little bit of Hebrew for you too.
This is why there are time limit draws. is booking like this.
One of the things that's interesting about the Hebrew though is the name Yisrael, literally the one who strives with God. The L on the end of Israel is literally God. So like there is an actual, it's not like a lot of names that have no meaning. This one really does have a meaning. It's just a phrase that means the one who strives with God. And that being more further applied to the people of Israel down the line, like we've long since forgotten that this is a name that has an inherent meaning to it linguistically. So it's kind of just an interesting fun fact. I'll take this line for you out of Alter, though, where he says, it's not clear whether the anonymous adversary is referring to himself when he says Elohim, or to more than human agents encountered by Jacob throughout his career.
What?
So we're talking about Elohim here in verse 29. So 29, 30.
Verse 29?
29, 30-ish. And it has to do with the naming as well. So the addition of El into the name of the one who strives with God. We're not sure. What Alter is telling us is the one who strives with God may refer to this wrestling match or may refer to Jacob's life in general. It's not clear about that.
Yeah. Well, I do see that there's a note in here that says that it shows two different translations as the one who strives with God or God strives. And the one who strives with God can mean a couple of different things, at least in the English translation.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like a line out of Xenogears, but that notwithstanding. L ending generally.
Sorry, there are people driving super loud outside.
Okay, this is interesting. The verb, because it's literally Sada El, the verb Sada here. Alter notes that the verb Sada is a rare one, and there's some question about its meaning. An educated guess would be rule or prevail or strive or something like that. Yisada El is how it's put together. but it's not something that has a clear modern meaning. My take from this is that it's kind of like the Japanese word gambado, something you can't totally translate into other languages. So the original sense of the name altar suggests might be God rule or God prevail. So there is that element to it as well. So it's a very complicated naming situation. And altar goes on to point out as well that it's often used not as a replacement for Jacob, but as a synonym for Jacob over time. And unlike Abram becoming Abraham, it lives beyond him in that way. So it is notably different too. But yeah, dude won his name in a wrestling match. How did that shit happen?
Question mark?
Yeah, like
some unknown local talent,
I guess. But you know, this is I like, by the way, and I'm going to say this, I like Altar's translation of where is it here? Verse 30. Because in verse 30 in the NRSVUE that we have, it reads, "So Jacob called the place Peniel, saying, for I have seen God face to face, yet my life is preserved." Altar, who bless this person's heart, loves to translate these things in ways that are poetic or work better in English, because that's accurate but unwieldy. The way Altar translated is, "And Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, meaning I have seen God face to face and I came out alive." I like that a lot better. So what do you think it was? Do you think this was Jacob wrestling with God, or do you think this was
he was all alone? Like, as a skeptic, I tend to come at a lot anything supernatural, like which is funny for some self-professed witch, but like I tend to come at a lot of supernatural stuff about like, now was it really, did it really? I'm like, I love alien stuff, but I gotta debunk everything, same with ghost stuff and monsters and all that kind of crap. Like, it's cool, but like I am very quick to find any other explanation. To revert to some wrestling terminology, it kind of sounds like Jacob's just trying to put himself over. Like, you know, he's building himself up with this insane story. I'm gonna be, how old is Jacob here? Because I gotta be honest, like, how do you strike someone on the hip socket to dislocate their fucking hip?
The implication, of course, being here that is more divine than a wrestling move here. Alter says here, the inclination of modern translations here to render the verb as struck is unwarranted, being influenced either the context or the cognate noun. But the verb almost always means to touch, even to barely touch. The adversary maims Jacob with a magic touch, or if one prefers, by skillful pressure on a pressure point. So in terms of the actual translation here, it's worth noting that this isn't like an injury that happens. This is something that like there's a characteristic difference between the act that the person seems to take and the response.
Okay, but this is so out of nowhere. Like, what do you think it is? Because it reads to me like there's just a story in the middle here while we're waiting to hear the rest of our tale, where it's like, but first, you know, a word from Bible wrestling.
We talked about this in the last episode a little bit, how this works as a kind of ahead of its time literary structure. But that piece aside,
it's just very like, hey, you got to hear this story about this fish I caught. It's a very much feeds off like a big fish story, and it's like, okay, I don't know how you dislocated your hip, but you definitely didn't wrestle God.
I am a natural skeptic as well, and I hear something like this, and my first inclination is to call bullshit, but also like I want to believe that there's something more going on here. Now, am I going to say,
I need an I want to believe poster with Jacob wrestling the angel or wrestling God.
There you go. Available in our merch shop whenever we finally get one.
Oh my God, yeah. Somebody please somebody who actually watches us, somebody's watching us, please make notes of the things that we said we would make merch of and remind us, because weird, obscure merch is awesome.
To answer for me, though, like, I don't know if I necessarily believe that he was wrestling God or even necessarily an angel. I think if I'm to take a mystical approach to this, I think this is probably some other thing loose in the world. Like, from the beginning, we even see that, like, a talking serpent is not out of the realm of possible for creation. And setting aside skepticism for a minute, like, the biodiversity depletion that's happened even just in our lifetime, let alone over the period of human history, this possible there could be any number of things long gone that were present in this day and age. Especially if we take this as something that happened long before the historical period to which it's attributed, and
long before it was written down.
Yeah. If we assume this to be an oral recollection of a much older story that's been put into a historical context later, yeah, this could be any number of fucking things. That being said, there's also an interesting approach here to consider that it might be God. If we date ourselves all the way back to the very first few episodes we did in the long running and critically acclaimed series Back to Basics, way back at the beginning, we talked about hey, I'm a critic and I acclaim it, I'll call it good enough. Anyway, anyway, back at the beginning, we talked about the fact that from time to time, God's anthropomorphized God's self and existed in a somewhat anthropomorphic form, walking through the garden, not knowing where these weird hairless monkeys are for some period of time and things like that. Like, there were moments where God did that after Eden, we don't see so much, but this could be one of the rare examples of God choosing to exist in that way, kind of like a proto-incarnation. I wouldn't put it past God, but also, like, it is a little bit out of character. My best guess here, and this is going to sound weirdly evangelical until I explain it. My best guess here is that it's Satan.
So you don't think it was the Macho Man Randy Savage?
Unless Macho Man Randy Savage happens to also be Satan, probably not. And now I'm going to clarify this slightly because, as you all know from listening to me rant, there is no biblical overarching Satan character. When we talk about Satan, we talk about Hasatan as appears in the book of Job, or Satanos as it appears in the New Testament, which refers to an angel or messenger in the service of God whose primary purpose is to put biblical heroes or other important people in the history of the world to the test, to see if they can live up to what they're meant to do, to see if they're ready to fulfill their potential, and to see that they're not going to break under the strain they're about to go through. The whole book of Job is about Hasatan doing Hasatan's thing and fucking with
the adversary,
Job, specifically to put Job to the test, to act as an adversary on God's behalf, to refine, to develop, and to challenge. This seems like just classical Hasatan here. It really does. And while the character is not identified, you know, it wouldn't be out of the ordinary to wrestle with Hasatan in this sort of scenario and then come out and say, I have seen God face to face and come out alive, because there's not always, particularly at this stage in the Bible, a great distinction between God and God's messengers. So for me, that's the explanation that suits my understanding of the text, is, yeah, it was Satan, but not in the way you think. So did I answer your question there with a long, rambly rant that is indicative of my usual self?
I assume. You go on long enough and you lose me. But no, there's a lot of interesting tidbits here that you really don't get on the initial incredibly goofy reading.
Yeah. And we also, like, those of us who've done the whole Sunday school thing growing up Christian bit, like, we get told a very different story of this passage too. Like, we get this the image of Jacob and a big winged angel going hand to hand all night long, and you know, Jacob's like, haha, I have bested God's messenger, so therefore I shall be known. Like, none of that really happened here. Like, and I really like to bring this point home too. Throughout the whole encounter, there is a solid feel from Jacob of, what the fuck is this? What is going on?
It just said that, you know, a man wrestled with him until daybreak. So did he just roll up and was like
Was it one of his servants in the present train ahead of him that got turned around and went the wrong way? We don't know. There's not a lot that happens here and is well explained. Although, you know,
if I was wrestling,
if I was a servant following Jacob and I realized about halfway through that I was in a wrestling match with my boss and he didn't realize who I was, I would definitely play Divine Angel and get out of there as quick as possible, on the hopes that our legendarily oblivious boss here didn't realize who he was dealing with.
Why okay, let's talk a little bit of just additionals here. Why was Jacob left alone on one side of the river? Like, why didn't he go with the rest of like his people and stuff?
This seems to be,
it's just a ford, like
like this seems to be kind of Jacob just doing the patriarch thing and making sure everyone gets across and then being the last one across because he's gonna make sure everything's all right.
But before he could cross, a dude jumped him. That's the kind of context we don't have here, though. It just says a man, he was left alone and a man wrestled with him. I'm like, it's a bit of a weird build.
Yeah, I mean, Jacob's already cut himself down to a pretty small group. Himself, both of his wives, his maids, and his 11 children. Relatively small group. Most of whom he gets them across the stream, and then he's on his own. And then he gets jumped by Macho Man Randy Savage, I guess. And that's where we're at. Yeah, pretty much it.
Only other question, the last bit, verse 32. What the fuck?
Yeah, this is something we get a lot in the Old Testament where there are specific.
And this is why we don't eat hip socket thigh muscle. And it's like, on people?
Yeah, it's, first off, the ancient Hebrew tribes were big on symbolism. Like, we don't eat it because on everything because this reason, because it's too holy, too divine. This is something we don't do this on anything because we choose to remember this particular event. Also, it's kind of later interpolation as well. Like, this was a traditional practice for most of Israel, and when they wrote it down, like, oh yeah, this is a good reason to say this is why we don't do this thing. We don't really have a good reason for why we do this, so we're going to write this down. That could be
a footnote. Yeah,
this is a little footnote. And we've seen this before where, like, we get to the end of a story and like, oh, and by the way, this is the reason why this whole nation of people exists, or this is a reason why this is a thing that gets done. It just is. Like, part of this is part of the written Old Testament when it was written down as a justification for existing beliefs and practices. Like, that's just part of what it was. And so we get shit like this to do that. And that's fine. Like, it doesn't take away from anything. Anything else we want to throw our hat in the ring at, or shall we tap out?
Yeah, I'm ready to tap.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for sticking with us for another fun and exciting episode. I hope this was as exciting as I hyped it up to be, and if not, well, oh well, what are you going to do? Challenge me to a wrestling match? I'm already old. My hips weak condition anyway. Screw it. So as usual, we've got our Discord server. Please come join us there. We've got our Bible study every month. We've got a hybrid in-person and online worship that's happening once a month as well in English. If you're in Japan, we're doing stuff here at the church. If you're not, we're doing stuff online. Please be a part of our community. I love that you watch our videos. If you're still watching to this point, like, you're dear to my heart to have gotten this far. And I love that you do, but come join in on the Discord server where all the rest of us are and talk to us about the things, because it'd be nice to see you once in a while. What are you doing? Who are you? How's your life? I'd like to know these things. Other inquiring minds would like to know. We like you. You're fun. Presumably. See, I just like making Courtney make fun faces. That's my whole job. And now that she's made her quota of fun and weird faces for the day, she's got something to ask you to do.
Oh yeah, like, share, and subscribe.
Yeah. Useful things, those. The more these videos get passed around, the more people they get in front of, and the better life is for all of us who are trying to keep making this stuff. So if you can pass it around, it is much appreciated. But that all said, I hope you guys have a wonderful and blessed week. I'm thinking about you. I'm praying for you. God's with you. Take care. Have a good one, and we'll see you on the next episode. Bye, everybody.
Bye.